Hello there. So far, what we have learned about risks in global supply chain management. Now, let's look at resilience. What is resilience? So, basically, resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. So, when we have risks or when we have challenges, resilience is all about the ability to overcome those challenges or the capacity to recover quickly from those challenges. So that is resilience. And remember that resilience is part of Industry 5.0. That is one of the pillar of Industry 5.0. And that is what we have learned during COVID-19 or after COVID-19, that the businesses who were sufficient, self-sufficient, or who were resilient, they have built up their supply chains very quickly. The factories, the service providers who were, for example, the people who were manufacturing clothing, they were resilient enough to manufacture PPE, which is personal protection equipment, or the masks and sanitizers and other things. They were resilient enough to manufacture those type of items during COVID-19. So they don't have to shut down their factories or their warehouses. They were resilient enough to switch over their production line from one type of product to another type of product. Now, what does that mean is the supply chain need to be resilient. For that, we need risk management. We need to manage the risk. We need to follow the process to manage the risk, to understand the risk, to forecast them, to predict them, and to come up with a strategy. Either it is accepting, either it is rejecting, or transfer, or whatever other strategy. We need to think about those strategies based on different type of risk. Either it has a positive impact or it has a negative impact on our supply chain. So for that, we need to be proactive. We need to follow the steps, or we need to come up with the steps to prevent those type of negative risk. Or sometime we need to come up with the steps to take the opportunity if the risk has positive impact. Because if the risk has positive impact on our supply chain, and we don't take the necessary steps to take that opportunity, we will be losing sales there as well. So we can quickly respond and rebuild our supply chain if the risk is negative. So for example, what happened during COVID-19? Many of the organizations, they started manufacturing masks, they manufacturing PPE clothing. Many of the clothing manufacturers switched their manufacturing from the normal clothing to the mask and the PPE clothing as well. So that has happened. Those organizations were resilient. Those organizations have predicted well in terms of that. If that kind of risk happened, that what can they do? So they don't have to shut down. They don't have to shut down their warehouse. They don't have to shut down their manufacturing facilities. They don't have to shut down their logistics as well. And they were very resilient to understand what is the need of the situation, of that event, and how can they perform well in those type of situations. So when we are planning for our project, when we are planning for our supply chain, we need to foresee, we need to forecast, or we need to predict those type of risks, that if that happen, what we are going to do. And that is being resilient. What we are going to do in those type of situation, we have a process to understand that, we have a process to establish that, and we have a process that how we are going to mitigate that as well. Now, there could be several different type of risks in global supply chain network. Some of the risks what we have seen earlier. Now, some of the risks could be natural disaster, and pandemic was one of the example of natural disaster as well, which has 35%. People are saying the percentage of supply chain affected was 35 because of a natural disaster like pandemic, or any other natural disaster, maybe heavy snowfall, or any cyclone, or any hurricane or something else. Shortage of skilled labor or skilled resources, that is another big issue of in our supply chain, that when we don't have the right people for the right job, that is a risk. Geopolitical uncertainty, where in some of the countries where there is uncertain conditions in terms of politics, where the governments are not stable, there where their currencies are not stable, that is risk as well. Terrorist infiltration of the cargo, that is another risk. Volatility of the fuel prices going up and down very frequently, that risk in that is one of the most predominant risk in supply chain. The fuel prices goes up, all the prices in supply chain goes up as well. Currency fluctuation, the prices going up and down, that is a risk as well. If you are trading from other countries or trading within different countries, for example buying product from China and selling it to USA, and you are based in Europe, then there are three different currencies could be. One in China, Chinese yuan, one could be the US dollar, and one could be the euros. So what will happen is 3 times currency conversion, the currency fluctuation is too much, then you might be losing a lot of money over here. Port operation custom delays, if there are any custom delays, that will delay your lead time. And several other risks. Forecasting planning accuracy, that is one of another important one. So if the forecasting is not right and the planning is not accurate as well, there is a high risk to lose the project, or high risk of losing the supply chain or the products or the services as well. Inflexible supply chain technology, when the technology you are using in your supply chain, maybe a standard operating process application, maybe e-commerce applications, if that is not flexible enough to to make changes at the time of any certain event or uncertain event where you're having negative impact on your supply chain, if those are inflexible, then that is much more risky. So those are some of the risks. Some more type of risks could happen in supply chain. Now, since we have seen so many different type of risks, you might think that supply chains are full of risk. Yes, it is, but at the same time, if we plan it well, if we forecast well, if we do proper risk management in our supply chain, there are always possibilities to convert those risks from negative impact to positive impact. It can give us better opportunities in terms of when we are competing with other organizations. We can do much better in terms of our competition when we analyze the risk properly, when we understand the risk, and when we know how we are going to mitigate, or when we know how can we be more resilient in terms of those risks. Now, some of the common sources of supply failure could be the substandard inputs. Now, when we talk about substandard input, it could be anything substandard. It could be the lead time. It could be the quality of the product. It could be the quality of the components, the raw material, the quality of the people, the quality of anything we are using in our supply chain. It could be the logistic provider. It could be any other thing. It could be materials. It could be services. So anything substandard is going to give us a substandard output as well. If you think about the input-output model very simply, so input, transformation, and output. So for example, we are producing something, and that is our factory environment, which is transformation. Our input of material and people is substandard, then the output of the final product will be substandard as well. So there is no point having the substandard input, and because transformation stage is not going to do any magic there to produce quality product. If there is substandard input, the output will be substandard as well. And if the output is substandard, either is product or services, our clients, our consumer, our customers are not going to like it, and they will give bad feedback, or that will that will harm the reputation of the organization and the product as well. So the common source of supply failure is substandard input. As an example, I given an example here: the microchip manufactured in Taiwan could be assembled in some other country, and could be, and that product is being exported to some other country, and some other country is using that product as well. It could happen in a supply chain that some of the products being manufactured in China, supplied to Europe, assembled there in a motherboard, and then motherboard is exported to US market, and then US market, Apple or any other laptop or computer manufacturer, they assemble a computer and then they sell it to worldwide market. So that is possible. That is a possibility. Now, when we have different supplier, as we have talked about earlier, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, the risk grows more and more because we don't have the direct control on those suppliers. So that input, substandard input at any stage in the supply chain, that will produce substandard output at some point in the supply chain. So we have to be very, very careful when we are thinking about the entire supply chain. We are calculating, or we are analyzing the risk associated with our supply chain. We have to look at the entire supply chain, not just the one part of the supply chain, because risk is everywhere in the supply chain. So as I mentioned, that we have to be resilient. So we can either accept, reject, or we can either transfer the risk to our supplier or to customer or any other third party. We also need to be resilient, that how we are going to act if that type of risk happen or that type of challenge we face, then how we are going to act or react on those challenges. And being being resilient in supply chain is very, very important nowadays, because in last 10-year time we have seen a lot of natural disasters, lot of different type of pandemics, and lot of other things happening in our supply chain and supply chain failure. So that is why resilience is very important. Now, I have a very good case study for you. I will give the link on the slides. So watch this video. That is a very good case study about the toilet rolls during the pandemic, why people were hoarding the toilet roll. A very good case study, brilliantly presented. It's a YouTube video, and please make sure you watch it. Thank you very much.